they are so digestible as movies. Like, it was the easiest thing in the world for me to watch 3 Mission Impossible movies in a day.
Yeah, she's a good guy, bad guy, good guy, bad guy, good guy, bad guy.
And continues into the next movie with the same MO.
What makes this franchise so good?
He has this line that I really like where he says, "Human nature, my weapon of choice."
How far would you go for a movie? Like, what are some of these stunts that you would be like, I would try that, but I want to hold our breath and see how long we can go. Welcome to Backseat Directing,
where we talk about movies, TV shows, comics, and more.
We're your hosts,
Andrew
and Aaron.
And we put out new episodes every Monday and Thursday.
And on this episode, we're doing a Mission Impossible franchise recap.
3, 2, 1,
action. I think we butchered that, but it's okay. It's really cool. It's an iconic song, as you can tell.
Drop the mic. Okay, so today we are going to cover the Mission Impossible franchise starring the man, the myth, the legend, Tom Cruise. We're going to go over like some general details, kind of recover a plot synopsis for the existing 6 movies. For anyone out there that's kind of wanting to get caught up to speed, because there's all of this story coming up and quite a bit of it is interconnected. So to get you up to speed for Dead Reckoning number 7, that's about to come out very soon, you guys can watch this video and get kind of a succinct version of the story without having to watch, 12 hours of movies?
Yeah, there's 6 movies and they span across almost 30 years. Like, there's a lot of movies to keep up with, and since they are a little bit older, some of the earlier ones, maybe it's been a while since you've seen them, because I know it has been for me. But I'm very excited for the new movie to come out. We're back-to-back Mission Impossible episodes here this week. We got Monday, we're doing the recap, and then later, Thursday, we got the full review coming out on Dead Reckoning. I am pumped.
We're getting juiced off the Mission Impossible.
Dude, Andrew's been so excited. You watched, what, 3 of them?
In a day.
In a day.
Yeah.
Dang. And I watched 2 of them in a day.
Nice.
So that's
They're
pretty good.
Rewatching them, I learned that they are so digestible as movies. Like, it was the easiest thing in the world for me to watch 3 Mission Impossible movies in a day, because I feel like I don't get tired of them. I don't get exhausted watching them. It doesn't feel like a slog. They play very much like candy for the brain. As you watch them, the camera work plays into that. It's very dynamic. And a lot of times, like, you'll see a simple conversation in a room, like in Ghost Protocol in the hotel, they have like these quick pans to Tom Cruise on the other side when he's now talking. They keep you very engaged. And then whenever there's exposition or like an important conversation or something that has to happen, I mean, sometimes that'll even be a walk and talk to keep you in it, but it's like condensed down to like a 3 to 5 minute sequence. And then you're back into like, now we're moving, now we're in Cairo, now we're in Morocco. Like, you're always moving, the plot's always moving forward, and it's very like, it's always like, we got to get the codes. Like, it's like very stuff that your brain is just like, all right, this is an action movie. Yeah. They got to get the nuclear launch codes from this bad guy. It's just, like I said, it's digestible, it's fun, and you can rock and roll with it like the whole way through.
Yeah, they're very like, quote unquote, like simple movies, but I think that's just like a disguise, because they all have really good stories, even better action, great actors, great actresses. You know, the cinematography is great. Like you said, it helps tell the story, but it doesn't distract you. The music, perfect. Sound design, fantastic. You know, like, I've always loved this franchise. And I feel like I have more so than you until probably like 3 days ago when you started getting hyped up for Dead Reckoning.
I've been very excited for Dead Reckoning, like the movie as a concept, and now I'm excited for it specifically as the movie. After rewatching the movies and falling in love with the story, I think kind of watching them all back to back without so much space in between, I really saw like how connected the story is from Ghost Protocol on, even from Mission Impossible 3 on, and like, it's truly a good story, and the characters like Ilsa Faust, Ving Rhames' character Luther, Benji, Ethan Hunt, they have a through line of relationships that connect these characters and their story throughout all these movies in a way that I don't think I appreciated as much before. So I think that's why the recap will be really good, because it's going to matter, I think, in Dead Reckoning.
Yeah, they do connect the movies really well, but at the same time, I don't think you necessarily need to see the previous movies to watch any of them.
Yeah, no, I watched Fallout with very little recollection of the plot of the previous movies and still enjoyed it. But then when you watch Rogue Nation and Fallout back to back, you're so much more appreciative of the like appearance of someone like Solomon Lane in the movie. Like, oh my God, he was such a good villain in the last movie because I just watched it. Like I think that it's a much better experience to watch them with like it sharply in your mind and knowing the story that happened, having kind of that recollection. I do recommend watching them all. I mean, if the recap is what you have time for, listen to our recap, but try and watch the movies because it's just so much fun. It's a nonstop thrill ride. And like it's like you said, it's simple, but at the same time, they can also be very complicated because you'll be watching like a triple, double, quadruple cross. Like
Yeah.
they're
You have to pay attention at certain points to really be able to follow. And especially in the one I just finished, what was that one? The name's always
Rogue Nation.
Yeah, it's Rogue Nation. That's the one. The girl in that one, she's like
Ilsa.
a good. Yeah, she's a good guy, bad guy, good guy, bad guy, good guy, bad guy.
And continues into the next movie with the same MO.
So it was like a little confusing. I unfortunately had to watch these two movies. I watched Ghost Protocol yesterday and today, and then Rogue Nation today. But I had to do so like while I was doing other things. You know, like one of them I was working out, the other one I was like doing the dishes, getting ready for work the next day. And it's fun to watch a movie when you're doing other things, but I really like to think of a movie experience as like an event, you know, as an experience. And I really like to sit down and just focus on just the movie. That's my like ideal. And I don't watch a lot of movies because I feel like I can't sit down and dedicate the time.
I think Rogue Nation is a good movie to focus on. But speaking of the focus these movies require and the plot twists and double crosses, I think now would be a good time to get into the recap relatively early. I do think that's going to be a reason people kind of click on this video if they see the thumbnail, and I think a big part of it will be to get that recap. And then hopefully they'll stick around to hear our thoughts about the movie afterwards. So are you good if I do the recap now?
Yeah, let's do it. What's going on in the first three films?
Okay, so the first three films are kind of like their own trilogy, and then there was a little bit of time in between the release of Mission Impossible 3 and the release of Ghost Protocol. So Mission Impossible 3 came out. Well, Mission Impossible 2 came back in 2000. So then Mission Impossible 3 came out in 2006. And then you got 5 years until Ghost Protocol. So let's look at it, like you said, in terms of the first three movies. So we start with Mission Impossible 1. You've got Ethan Hunt. He is a member of the IMF, the Impossible Mission Force, which has a very corny name, but they do really cool shit. And they go
That's why they use the abbreviation.
Yeah, they use it a lot. They got to hide that. So they go on what's considered like a milk run, like a very basic mission, and it ends up just going completely haywire. Every member of the team dies besides Ethan Hunt. He's now being framed for taking out the team, and he's getting, for the first time in a long line of this happening, disavowed by his government. And so he goes rogue, goes off on his own to solve the mystery. He ends up finding out that the team leader, who's played by Jon Voight, is actually alive and not dead. He orchestrated it and framed Ethan Hunt. He kills him and clears his name simultaneously. Then we start off in Mission Impossible 2. So I should mention the first Mission Impossible was directed by Brian De Palma, and that came out in 1996. And now we move on to Mission Impossible 2. We're now being with the director John Woo, another very talented action director. Now Ethan Hunt is kind of just traveling the world. We start out the movie with him rock climbing, just free climbing the side of a cliff. He gets the call from IMF that they need him for a mission. He goes right away. We can clearly see Ethan's hero complex building throughout these movies. So he goes and stops a guy who's bent on releasing this virus because he has ownership in a company that produces the antidote. So he's like committing medical terrorism, or biological terrorism, I should say, in the name of profiteering. And Ethan stops him, kills him. That movie's very isolated in its plot. I don't think it affects the other ones very much. But then we go into Mission Impossible 3, where we set the stage for like now a 4-movie line of completely connected plot. So he's retired basically from the field. He's training the new generation of IMF. One of his trainees gets captured, so he goes back into a mission. Although he's now married, he hides this from his wife, that he's going back in to participate in this mission, but he feels obligated to save this woman that he's training. Things go all sideways. He saves her, gets the villain, and then they get ambushed, and then Ethan Hunt's wife ends up being taken. He goes back after his wife, takes out all the bad guys and saves his wife, and they go off into the sunset, or so we think. And then we get told when we start back up in Ghost Protocol that Ethan has had his wife kidnapped again. He went after her, killed all the Serbian bad guys, but his wife died in the process. All kinds of mayhem ensues in Ghost Protocol. This is an incredibly action-packed movie. He is going after, again, a terrorist bent on the belief that causing a huge destruction, i.e. in this movie, a nuclear attack on San Francisco, the greater the suffering, the greater the peace is the MO throughout the next 3 movies. So in Ghost Protocol, he's trying to stop this guy who's trying to get the nuclear launch codes and trying to get a satellite. All the while, we're thinking that his wife is dead and he's recovering from this. At the end, he stops the nuclear launch. This is the introduction of Jeremy Renner's character, an analyst named Brandt, who turns out to be much more than an analyst. And by the end of it, we've stopped the bad guy, and we get the heartfelt moment between Brandt and Hunt where he tells Brandt that his wife is actually alive. Her death was a cover to keep her alive. We find out that Ving Rhames' character taught her to be a ghost, so she's out there in the world, safe, separated from Ethan, where he can't make her in danger anymore. We now pick up in Rogue Nation, now at movie number 5. So much has happened. But now we're in Rogue Nation, where we get the introduction of this new villainous force, the Syndicate. So the Syndicate is this evil network of rogue spies, of Rogue Nation, if you will. He calls them later in the movie. They're organized by their leader, Solomon Lane, who is so menacing, so villainous. He has this group of trained killers at his beck and call. Basically, the MO of this group is that they've been used as puppets by their government, and now they're turning back and destroying governments to get vengeance on the people that use them to kill aimlessly. Because one day they just turned around and said, why am I getting used like this? And started fighting against them and causing chaos in the world. Still kind of going under that moniker of the greater the suffering, the greater the peace. But the main point of Rogue Nation is that Solomon Lane is trying to get access to this red box, I think they call it, which is he needs the prime minister to access it, and it has access to all these funds that he can use to fund his terrorist organization. Ethan plays a huge gamble, ends up defeating Solomon Lane, who has kidnapped Benji, gets Benji back, traps Solomon Lane in a glass box, and he gets shipped off at the end of this movie to be tortured and interrogated by the different governments of the world to answer for the crimes he's committed, various atrocities, crashing planes, bombing villages, releasing like neurotoxins and all these crazy things. And the mess that they're left to clean up that they start up with in Fallout is catching the rest of the Syndicate. There's still all these rogue agents out there. Although they don't have their cohesive nature as much as they did under Solomon Lane, they're still being somewhat controlled by a new mysterious anonymous person who goes by the moniker John Lark. We also get the introduction of Henry Cavill's character. We learn his name is only Agent August Walker, and he's tasked with being a representative for the CIA as Ethan and his IMF team go after this new syndicate threat and try to stop John Walker from picking up, again, plutonium for, again, a nuclear strike. And at the beginning of this movie, Ethan chooses to protect Luther over prioritizing the mission, and the villains kind of get away. So that's where we pick up at the beginning of Fallout. He's going back after the plutonium that he had to let escape to save Luther. They go through all these events, the Halo jump with Walker. They go to France to this party. They fight John Lark, or who they think is John Lark, and end up killing him. Ilsa Faust shoots him. I don't even think I've touched on Ilsa Faust. There's so much to discuss in these movies. I'm trying to be succinct for you guys. So
you're doing good.
Thank you. But Ilsa Faust returning from Rogue Nation, she was an undercover double agent working under Solomon Lane in the Syndicate. Now she's back in Fallout, helping them go after John Lark. Like I said, they kill the proxy for John Lark, who we end up finding out is a proxy. And then they discover through a ploy using Agent Hunley that the actual John Lark is Agent Walker. He has infiltrated the CIA, and he is also a member that is leading the Syndicate. Agent Walker escapes with the codes, but they have a tracker on him, and he escapes with Solomon Lane, who they've broken out from custody. So they go after him in this small village in Asia where there's this giant glacier that they're going to bomb with a nuclear strike that's going to poison and radiate the water supply for 30% of the world, and they're going to kill 30% of the world's population in one big foul swoop. That's the plan. But again, Ethan and his team, just in the nick of time, as Hunt calls it, they survive by the same margin as usual at the end of that movie, which is a fraction of a second. They stop the nuclear strike. They, again, catch Solomon Lane. A giant hook goes through Walker's face and kills him. And Ethan has this cathartic conversation with his wife, who has been alive this whole time, surviving on her own. He has this emotional moment with her where she kind of, again, accepts that they can't be together. She recognizes, I think, in her eyes that he's going to move on with Ilsa Faust, who lives in his world. He has him and Ilsa Faust acknowledge their romantic feelings for one another, and they close out this movie. The syndicate has seemingly been defeated. Solomon Lane, as I said, is in custody. John Walker is dead, but as we know, it's not all over because we're coming up on Mission Impossible Dead Reckoning just this week, so we'll be excited to see where everything goes.
Man, it's a shame August Walker had to die.
I know. I would have loved to see more Henry Cavill's beautiful face in there.
Also, Jeremy Renner, where did he go?
I know. I miss Brant so much. I loved having him in the movies.
Yeah, I think he was a great addition to the franchise.
He was amazing in Ghost Protocol, and I wish he could be back. Let me cross over all these directors because I kind of lost it there as I went along. But the first movie, Mission Impossible 1, is directed by Brian De Palma. Mission Impossible 2 is directed by John Woo. Mission Impossible 3 is directed by J.J. Abrams. And then Mission Impossible 4, Ghost Protocol, is directed by Brad Bird. Every movie since then, i.e., Rogue Nation, Fallout, and now Dead Reckoning, is being directed by Christopher McQuarrie, who's also writing on the movies and has a long history of working with Tom Cruise in previous movies like Jack Reacher and The Mummy.
Yeah, and I have some of the box office numbers for each of the movies and the IMDb ratings as well. So Mission Impossible 1 has a 7.1 out of 10 on IMDb. The budget was estimated to be $80 million, and it brought in $457 million. So pretty good return, especially for a first
franchise
entry in the franchise. Mission Impossible 2 has the lowest IMDb rating of the franchise at a 6.1 out of 10.
Deservedly so.
A budget jump to $125 million, and the box office brought in almost $100 million more, which ends up being $546 million. Mission Impossible 3 jumped back up in the ratings at a 6.9 out of 10, budget 150, so we're still climbing in the budget. But this time the box office didn't even bring in as much as the first movie, and it brought in $398 million. Then we're getting into kind of the second trilogy in this franchise with Ghost Protocol, which is one of maybe my favorite one. We have a 7.4 out of 10 on IMDb, budget 145, about the same as the third, and then a box office skyrocket jump of $694.7 million.
Movie revived the franchise in a big way.
Definitely. The next movie, Rogue Nation, is almost a carbon copy in these numbers as Ghost Protocol. We have a 7.4 out of 10 again. Budget is only $5 million more at 150, and then the box office is only 10 million apart at 682.7 million. So just shy of Ghost Protocol. So when I was writing down these numbers, I had to go back and check Ghost Protocol that I was writing down the right numbers because they were so identical. And then Mission Impossible Fallout has the highest IMDb rating of a 7.7 out of 10. The largest budget as well at a $178 million budget. And then the box office also brought in the most money at $791 million. So almost $100 million more than Ghost Protocol, which was the second highest grossing movie. So each movie seems to progressively get better and better, or at least be at the same standard. Especially with these last three in the franchise, they've brought in a good amount of money, definitely justifiable for the studio to keep making these movies. What makes this franchise so good? Like, why is it not tired? They have very similar stories throughout, but at the same time, they tweak it just enough to where it's new and refreshing. I mean, when you were going over the recap, Ghost, Rogue Nation, and Fallout were kind of all about the same thing. but they're all different and they're all really good at the same time. Like,
yeah, I think they kind of switched out some of the details and gave us a fresh look in Rogue Nation, because Rogue Nation wasn't as much about trying to stop like a nuclear strike as the other two, but it was more about like making sure Solomon Lane didn't get away and didn't get all this money to where he would be in the wind and an unstoppable threat at the same time. So it was more about the red box and the money, which I think was refreshing. Plus the creation of this villain, Solomon Lane, really, I think, changed the game. And I think that's why he came back in Mission Impossible Fallout, because he's so beloved. Like, he has this line that I really like where he says, "Human nature, my weapon of choice." And I was like, oh, it's such a good line, because it establishes him as a badass. It's encapsulates his character so well, because it's what we've seen him do the whole movie. And it's just one of the all-time, I think, great villain lines in a movie.
And it's kind of true, right?
It's so true, because he uses what he knows how people will react to situations, and he uses that as a weapon. Like, it's not just a threat, it's not just a game. He actually uses human nature as a weapon. He's like, oh, if I incite fear, they'll react this way. If I incite, doubt, then they'll act this way towards Ethan Hunt, and he'll do this. Like, he has it so down to a minute detail.
Who starts wars? Humans do.
Yeah.
Like, that is a really good line. But yeah, like, comparing this franchise to some of the other franchises that have this many entries, like Jurassic Park, Fast and the Furious definitely comes to mind. And there's some other ones too. I think what this one has, what this one has above maybe some of those is that they didn't like refresh the cast completely in the last three, like they did with Jurassic. And then also they kind of stay within their world's rules the whole time, which I really appreciate. Maybe people really like in Fast and Furious how they kind of up the ante each time. But I like how this is all contained, and you go back and watch the first three, and it feels the same, like it's in the same world as the last three, and I think that is really good. But then also we have Tom Cruise, just a stud of an actor, obviously amazing at the stunts, and he's always pushing the envelope of what humans are possible, of what his personal body is capable of. And it comes through in each movie, because it's like, man, like that stunt was freaking insane.
Well, that's a huge draw for all these movies, I think. And it's something that they just like, they keep hitting the hammer of it down again, is like, look at our guy, look what he's doing.
Yeah.
And for rightfully so, because it draws so much people into this movie to be like, what is Tom Cruise going to do next? And the knowledge that when they show the camera on his face, it's because it's really his face.
Yeah.
It keeps keeps me on the edge of my seat personally. And I think it does for a lot of people.
And it's also, these movies aren't like overly CGI heavy. I mean, yeah, there's a lot of special effects shots and stuff that are going into it, but for the most part, it all feels real. It all feels plausible. Even though the name is Mission Impossible, it feels like there's maybe like a little sliver that it's like, oh, maybe Tom Cruise could actually pull that off.
Yeah, it's
in real life.
You're watching Mission Impossible Fallout, right? And you're watching the Halo jump, which is one of the most iconic series in the franchise. Obviously, the lightning storm is special effect shots. And then I think everything is color corrected to night, because there's no way they did this jump at night either.
Right.
But the fact that looks so much better when the people are real in camera, and then you make those adjustments after the fact rather than, just a blue screen.
Also, what a complicated shot that was, too. I don't know if you've seen the behind-the-scenes stuff, but they had to focus the camera in the air. Like,
that cameraman deserves an award.
That's really hard. I think the if I'm remembering correctly, they had to, like, at a certain point in the jump, they had to be exactly 3 feet apart from each other. And if they weren't, it'd be out of focus.
You can see it pretty early, close to the beginning of the jump. You can see where the camera comes up, because they wanted to show his face in the suit.
Yeah.
And you can very clearly see that moment where they got that perfect angle with between the cameraman and Tom lining everything up perfectly.
Do you know how many times they did that jump?
I don't off the top of my head. I think
some reason the number 8 is coming to mind.
I was gonna say 8 too, but I wasn't sure, because
then it has to be 8.
I recently
fact check us.
I recently watched an interview about it, and it was either that or the plane hanging on the side of the plane was 8
that
takes.
was wild.
One of them.
That was wild. I'm pretty sure for that plane scene that because he didn't have any like sort of glasses or anything. So he had like super thick contacts on to where he could barely see. I mean, could you imagine the amount of like wind force that you're getting by holding onto the outside of a plane?
It was also contacts that went like on his whole eye, not like normal contacts just cover like your pupil and the iris, but it was like covering the whites of his eyes, because they said like a small piece of debris would have just gone right through his eyeball at the speeds they were traveling. He also like, he talks about, he's like, oh, I was talking with the pilot because I'm also a pilot. I love to fly. And I was telling him like, hey, we need to hit like the right amount of G's because I want my legs to be up against the side of the plane. I don't want them dangling at an angle. Like, he's basically saying like, hey, I want you to put me through hell because I want the audience for this, 10-second shot to see my legs come up parallel to the ground, because I think that is what is most entertaining. Like that's crazy. That's a high level of dedication
and knowledge and experience, right? Like he goes up to this probably professional pilot and he's like, hey, you better do this the way that I want you to, or I'm going to do it myself. I don't know how, but I will.
He did follow it up saying that the pilot like laughed and was like, basically like, don't worry, like it's going to be enough. He's like,
you do this on the side for movies. Yeah. I do this every day of my life.
Dude, he said that it felt so intense, like that he was like pinned to the side of the plane. And he said he was thinking like jokingly, he was like, was this such a good idea?
That's crazy. And they definitely did that more than once.
There's like a wire. There's like a one wire harness in a harness connecting him to the plane. It's insane.
Yeah, that's crazy.
It might not even be the craziest thing he's done.
What do you think his wildest stunt is that we've seen so far?
In my opinion, it's the Taj Mahal sequence. Or I always say the Taj Mahal. It's the Burj Khalifa sequence in Ghost Protocol.
Dude, when he's running down the side of the building.
Dude, have you seen the featurette, the behind the scenes footage of him?
I'm sure I've seen clips of it. I don't think I've seen the whole thing.
He literally really ran and jumped and started running down the side of it.
That's insane.
It's so crazy.
I'm pretty sure that one they had like a producer or like stunt coordinator or something that was like, you can't do this. And they fired him and got someone who would do what he wanted them to do. And I'd imagine that's probably the movie that he started becoming the producer so he can do whatever he wants. Whoever
told him that he couldn't do that, I'm so glad that he had them fired, because that is like my favorite sequence in all of Mission Impossible.
Yeah.
It's so cool. That sequence on the Burj Khalifa is such a pitch perfect example of how well Tom Cruise and the staff of that movie understood entertainment. Like Brad Bird, hats off as the director. But just every element of it, the way that they created the need. And yes, I will say, I mean, no movie's perfect. The franchise does have like these expositional moments or these things that are just kind of honestly seem like BS in order to force them down the avenue that they had planned in the first place. Like they clearly wrote it in a way that was like, okay, we want them to climb the side of the tallest building in the world. And then they were like, they just made up some computer BS where they're like, oh, we can't hack into the server from the outside. I don't have enough time. We got to get into it. We got to be in the room. And they're like, vents like this. They're like, no, like the vents are laser protect, like whatever they make up. And then they work their angle, but it works. And I accept all of it. It's like, because it gets you where you need to go. To him on the outside of the building where he's got this super cool tech where he like rolls it off and then it
sounds like an Iron Man glove, right?
But they create the fear and the sensation so perfectly. That's why I say this sequence is such a good example, because that one shot that just kind of arcs around with him as he swings from inside to that first touch on the outside of the building creates like suspense and dread and shows you the huge scale of the building, and it's looking down and there's a sandstorm off in the distance, and then as he gets up, the one hand is just malfunctioning. He can't even trust it anymore. Tom Cruise rips it off and spits it into the wind, and now he's like creating this pinch grip with his feet and like climbing up the side of the building with one hand, where any moment that hand is disconnected, he is not firmly connected to this building. He's on a 150-story building, free climbing the outside of it. I know that Tom Cruise is wired in, but in that scene, you feel like he is very just a hairline away from death, just falling 150 feet. And then you actually see him fall and smack on and catch himself like 10 stories below.
And when he literally runs and jumps out of the window and then continues to run down the building. Like, what? I can't even comprehend doing that. in my brain.
That's what I'm saying.
That's insane.
Where they hit these check marks is they create something impossible and so scary. And then they up the ante, the glove's not working. And then they up the ante, like the window's not breaking. He has to like jump and kick through it. And then they up the ante again. He's got to run down the side of it to get back down in time, but his rope's not long enough. And then he's got to like run along the side of the building, and he makes that crazy leap and like smacks into the side of the building. And then Brant and the other agent with them have to like grab onto the edge of his pant leg, and now he's hanging off the 100-story building. Like they just keep upping the ante. And
but they also do a good job of like showing the fear in the characters too.
Because if he was,
it's not just like, hey, we can do whatever we want, we're superhuman,
Yeah, if he was unrealistically stone cold, it would take the fear and dread out of the audience too. I think they understand all of that so well, don't you think? Like,
absolutely. Especially when Jeremy Renner's character is like looking over that fan, and he's like, all right, I gotta jump. And he's like stretching. And he's like,
nervous.
Okay, you sure I have to jump? All right, I'm gonna jump now. Jump! And then he finally does it. Like they show fear, but they also show fear in Ethan Hunt too, or even doubt in the plan sometimes, which I enjoy. They continuously write themselves into a corner.
Yes.
And I'd say about half the time, maybe a little bit over half the time, they solve it by coincidence. But then
they talk about luck a lot.
Yeah,
they acknowledge it.
Right. There's still a good amount of the problem solving that comes from the characters, enough to where it's like, all right, I believe these characters are actually good at what they're doing.
And they're so skilled that a lot of times they couldn't take advantage of what would be considered luck if they weren't as good as they are.
Right. Yeah.
I think that I love the extra details they put in. That's what makes me like Mission Impossible, is because anybody could think, let's have the guy scale the outside of the building. It's been done in other movies. Or they could think, let's have him jump, into this wind tunnel with the fan. But the Mission Impossible story thinks, how do we put a twist on this? How do we put people on the edge of their seat? Let's put a clock on it. Let's put an intense countdown on this. Let's make everything go haywire. Let's make everything not go according to plan. And then they've got to figure it out in the heat of the moment. Yeah.
Or in Rogue Nation, like he runs out of air.
Yeah.
And the lady...
Yeah, he gets hit by the arm of the device, and now he's just spinning. And in Rogue Nation, perfect example.
Yeah, something that I want to mention, too, that they do really well in this franchise is they show, not tell, a lot. A lot of the times, Ethan Hunt is literally showing something without even speaking. Like when he showed that Russian guy, like how to slide down the rope.
Yeah,
he literally just did the movements, and he was like, now you
handed it to him. Yeah.
But he didn't say a word. And there is a lot of expeditions where they're like explaining a plan or something, but it all feels natural. It all feels like, oh yeah, they're explaining it to the other character in the room, not to the audience watching the movie.
I also really love the tech in this movie, and I feel like the tech does what you said too, is it shows. Like when they put that key in, that it's just like a skeleton key for any door. You see like on a little screen on the key, the little, what are they called in a lock, the tumblers or whatever. You see it meeting into them, and then they turn it. Like it shows, he's not like, this is my skeleton key, I put it in a door and it unlocks
Or
it.
when they first introduced the glove, they just threw it onto the window.
Yeah.
And they're like, oh look, those stick to glass.
And then in case you have like a reservation, they address that. You're like, well, how does his hand come off? Then they're like, oh, you roll off. That's all they're not like going too far into it. The tech in the movie is so lovable. And I think it's Protocol with Jeremy Renner when they hop onto that train that's like an IMF.
Yes.
That like one table like comes moving off the ground, and it has like a screen that lights up on it. He throws something down on it, and it like reads the USB right off the landing on the table. That tech is just so entertaining to me, and it's very streamlined and simple. It's not like gaudy.
Yeah, no, they do a lot of good things. Another note that I have on here is the use of music and sound design is stellar.
But I do think in the beginning of Ghost Protocol, I think this weeds out as the franchise goes along. In the beginning of Ghost Protocol and in previous movies, the sound effects are somewhat very cheesy.
A little bit, maybe
like you hear
on
a punch,
the punches,
like
sure. But I'm thinking more of like when they play like this epic theme and stuff, and then also when they don't play music, I think is an important part of sound design.
Dude,
like when they're going through that hallway and they have that little screen that has the camera up. One, they didn't explain how that worked. They literally just set it up and showed us.
They showed you perfectly because they have the little arm moving behind there, and you intuitively understand that it's scanning his eyes because it shows a box around his eyes. It's so good.
And Benji stands up and goes in front of the camera, and gets pushed out of the way to show us that it's recording behind them.
That's such cool technology. It's scanning the room behind them and then projecting it to his eyes to where, based on where he's standing, perspective. Like, so cool.
They didn't play music during that whole scene.
Yeah, no, I thought about that as well.
The scene was a long scene too. It was like 3 to 5 minutes long, and they didn't play a sound, and it really made the scene more intense.
I guarantee you, when that movie was in theaters, the theater was dead silent during that sequence because
you're focused.
As an audience member, I was like, shh, like we can't get Benji and Hunt caught right here. Like, it's literally, the intensity is so good in that scene without a word, and like they're, like you said, they're showing not telling so much. Like Benji and Ethan have to act to one another. Simon Pegg and Tom Cruise have to act to one another. Like, and then they're using hand signals like, all right, now go forward. And like his frustration with Simon Pegg has to be on his face for messing up. You know, it can't, because there's no words. And then that sequence gets even cooler too, when the villain is blowing their plans. He just gets on the mic and he's like, team leader, we've done this and this. And you're like, oh, you also, they're showing not telling again. You're like, oh, this guy is setting them up. And you get it. They're not like, oh no, we're being set up. Like,
they just act as if they all know what's happening, and then therefore the audience kind of can pick up on what's happening. But I wrote some more notes for Ghost Protocol.
I just want to say, before we move further into Ghost Protocol, that what we've already talked about so far is why Ghost Protocol is my favorite movie. It's because
I was going to ask you that. Which one's your favorite?
It's because of the Kremlin sequence and because of the Burj Khalifa sequence. Yeah. And the Kremlin sequence, I just think, is so well executed. Like that whole hallway sequence, like you said, I'm awestruck by just how quiet it is and how I was just like, you know, my heart's beating. I'm on the edge of my seat. And that is another masterful explanation of it, of how they capture that, just like the Burj Khalifa, is they remove sound and they make you feel like you're in the room with them. And the tech is just so cool.
Yeah, when I was watching Ghost Protocol, I had a little bit more time to kind of write notes as I was going. So I have a little bit more for that one. But that one is the one that I've always gone back to thinking like, oh, that's a fantastic movie. I remember really liking Fallout, which I haven't yet gotten to see it again in preparation for the movie coming out. But by the time this episode comes out, I've already seen it. I'm going to watch it this weekend. But another note that I wrote that applies directly to Ghost, but also the other movies, is their pacing of action is so good, because like in the hallway scene, it's intense, but it's slow. It's methodical. It's thought out. But then also when he's escaping from the hospital and he's on the ledge and the cop just lights his cigarette. He's like,
that scene's so great.
Jump. I'd like to see you. I'm actually interested to see what you do here.
What does he say to him? He's like, you think this is a good idea? And he's like, it seemed like a good idea a couple minutes ago.
Yeah. And it's like, they could have really rushed that, right? They could have just showed him get on the ledge, slap his belt across the wire, and slide down like he did. But they gave us time to let the scene develop.
Yeah, I'm telling you, it's the extra details.
Yeah.
It's patient filmmaking is what it is.
But then they have a lot of action scenes where it's just nonstop. But they give it to you at a good rate, you know, to where it's not just in your face of like nonstop, senseless action. Kind of like maybe the Gray Men. The Gray Men, I feel like kind of was like that, you know?
John Wick after the first John Wick, I would say.
Yeah, that's a good example too. I feel like Ethan Hunt is very close to what John Wick is, but just I think it's better performed and better written.
I think it's toned down a little bit. I think John Wick is meant to be what he is, but I think it works better in the first movie. What you're saying is, it lines up so perfectly with what I'm thinking. Like, I think you say it honestly, because what this movie does so well, and you've touched on it, and I even touched on it earlier, is all these movies, they are action-packed, whether it's bullets flying and explosions or action-packed in these quieter moments. It still keeps you so enthralled, so engaged. Even the conversations, they're usually high stakes or very intense, where it's like, your government's disavowing you, or are you with me? Or Benji saying like, I'm not leaving you, like we're going on this together in Rogue Nation.
It's also not too much dialogue either. You know, that's very concise. It's very natural feeling, you know? Everyone like reacts like you would in a real conversation, like Jeremy Renner when he gets upset of like Ethan's plan or whatever. And the last one that I just watched, Rogue Nation. You know, where they were kind of like they had differing opinions and views on like what they should do next.
They fought, and then I think another really good example is in Ghost Protocol, where they're going up against. They're having to do this like simultaneous, super tricky thing where they're getting the codes, I think it is, for diamonds, and then taking the diamonds to the other guy to give it to him for the codes. And they have to coordinate this so well. Like it's not for most of that, it's not fighting until the end when she realizes the contact in Brand's eye. But everything up until then is still edge of your seat. It's still basically action just without fighting. It's so intense and enthralling. They create these scenarios. They're so smart about the way they create these scenarios because they put them in a bind where they're like, okay, you have to, there's no time. We got to do this simultaneously. They're both here. You got to get him to switch. They got to have them both believe that they're in a room with the other person. You got to convince him that you're, you know, the nuclear launch specialist. And then it's so, there's so many balls in the air that it's impossible to lose focus or to get bored as an audience member.
No, I totally agree. And Tom Cruise looks more in shape every single movie. I don't know how that's possible.
Yeah. How cool is
I think he looked the oldest in Ghost Protocol. And then in Rogue Nation, like, I don't know, he looked 5-10 years younger. Yeah. I don't understand.
Yeah, you're right. In Ghost Protocol, he does look the oldest.
Like when he's like handcuffed to that pole, absolutely shredded. And he's got to be what, 50 something?
I was thinking of that scene too. And also in that scene, I audibly like gasped and I out loud was like, wow, when he like kicks his leg up. And
did he actually do that? Because that was crazy.
I feel like probably not, but just it looked
maybe like the first two little heaves or whatever. But maybe with some wire assistance, but that was really cool. I was like, that was awesome.
The way he came off the top of it and vaulted down, and just everything about that was like. It's another thing. It's a details thing, like we said, is they just barely can't reach the cuff, and that's a little bit funny and it's entertaining to see. Yep. And then he has to. They wrote themselves into that, so now they find a creative way out with stunts. Yep. That's what they do. Is they write scenario wise a difficult situation, and then they're like, all right, get the stunt coordinator in here. How are we going to get out of it?
They also have a lot of like cool shots, like not just action, choreography, but like really cool shots. Like in Rogue Nation, the mirror shot where they're putting the mask on Benji, that wasn't a mirror. It's a different room. They had duplicate actors, and then you see Tom Cruise and the whoever they're putting the mask on the other side of the wall, and then you have Benji and the girl on this side of the wall. Like that's a really cool shot, you know, like, and it's not CGI. That's really cool, you know, and they might have touched up some things, sure, but like we could recreate that shot. You know, and like that's something that's really cool. Also in Ghost, when he's climbing and they pan from back behind him and they pan into front of him and you see the storm. I don't know how they did that.
Yeah, because there'd be a window on him in front.
Yeah, unless if that was something that was done in post. I don't know how to recreate that in real life, but that was a really cool shot. It made me think like, oh, that's neat. But kind of going back to the stunts, like being so dedicated as an actor, like you have to perform, but then he's also pushing himself to the limit. Like how far would you go for a movie? Like what are some of these stunts that you would be like, I would try that. And for some other ones, I would leave that to professionals. Like how daring are you?
I think the furthest, I mean, I'm going to sound like I'm talking out of my ass, but
that's fun though.
The furthest I would maybe go is some of the jumps he does in Fallout, especially if they were in like a studio sense. If I just had to create the jump and then they made it look like there was you know, because if it's not quite 10 stories up in the air, then you're just making a wide jump. But I'd be if it's a smaller gap, I'd probably be willing to jump between some buildings.
Like jumping. Okay, yeah. Yeah.
If it's not, you know, if it's like
would you hang on the side of a plane?
No. I mean, I don't know. For some of the things where if I'm securely strapped in, I might be a little bit more confident in it. I wouldn't want to put those contacts in my
I was just going to say, I don't think I can get those contacts in. I can barely get eye drops into my eyes, let alone contacts.
Have you seen the video? Somebody's literally peeling like back his eyelids and they have like it's like on a stick and they stick it in his eye.
I don't know how he does that. What about like being in a car crash? Just the head on collision? Would you,
I wouldn't want to do that.
Drifting around in the car? Would you
be
willing to learn how to do that?
I'd be willing to try drifting around in the car. I would not try the motorcycle stuff. I would not try anything related to the Burj Khalifa. No, thank you. I'm not going on the outside of a building like that.
What about some of the fighting
it.
stuff?
I mean, that stuff's really underrated, really dangerous
up and
too.
Slammed into a table, like
I think that'd actually be kind of fun, like a breakaway table or something, you know?
yeah, or like the bathroom scene in Fallout.
I want to go through like some studio glass, like some movie stunt glass.
Yeah, that'd be really cool. I think it's also still like kind of sharp though.
Oh,
like,
for glass bottles in movies, they use this special stuff that like shatters, like crumbles to dust, and it's not dangerous.
I think sometimes they actually just put a charge in glass, and it's actually glass, like from a window and stuff.
It might look better that way, the way it shatters. Yeah. Maybe that's. What about you though? How far would you go?
I would love to try the car stuff for sure. You know, especially like if I'm not getting into a intentional crash. You know, like I might accidentally do something when I'm practicing or whatever, but I think I'm willing to practice that. All the fight stuff seems really cool. I would love to try to learn like the choreography of it all. Some of the big intense stuff, you know, like I can't do a flip or anything like that. Like that I would have to leave to someone else. But
let's make that our goal. We'll learn to backflip.
Yeah, but being like smashed through glass, like you said, or something like that, I feel like that'd be a lot of fun. You know, I think
chase sequence would be fun. I want to do one of the like long.
Oh, just runs. Like where you're running? Yeah. Dude, like you got to be in shape, one, to just be able to sprint really fast, right? Like most people 30 years and older don't sprint anymore.
Yeah.
You know,
I was saying like
when's the last time you've done a full out sprint?
Me?
Yeah.
It would definitely be within the last couple months.
Really?
Yeah. You don't ever do intervals?
Not very often right now.
Well, your training's pretty different than
Yeah. You run more than I do.
Yeah.
But I'd say for me it's at least 6 months. In the last 6 months.
But yeah, not often. It wasn't like this week.
Like he has to peak for certain aspects of the movie, you know, training wise, which I think is fascinating because I'm really big into a structured program with a specific goal at the end. So it's really cool how like throughout the movie he has to do that for different aspects of the movie.
He has very high standards when it comes to everything, like from fitness to camera work to stunts to operating these different various vehicles. You know, you heard how he had everybody from Top Gun Maverick like go into a boot camp, right?
Yeah.
Like they were going to shoot the shirtless scene. They weren't in as good a shape as he wanted them, and he said, "All right, we're gonna do a boot camp, and then we'll do this."
I'm pretty sure a week later they had to reshoot it, or some amount of time later they had to reshoot it. So I'm sure they had to like go through that all.
It wasn't up to the crew's standards.
Yeah, that's crazy. Another like simple but really impressive thing is in not Ghost, the next one.
Rogue Nation.
Rogue Nation.
You've been forgetting Rogue Nation this whole time.
And it's right in front of me too. But in Rogue Nation, Tom Cruise had to hold his breath for 6 minutes.
Dang.
And that wasn't even like he did that just once and they got the shot kind of thing. For that underwater scene, they had to do that multiple times. You know, I'm sure he wasn't like maxing out at 6 minutes every single time.
It's the benefit of him being able to learn to hold his breath for 6 minutes is that it took a lot less attempts to get the shots they needed.
Yeah, exactly.
So he did production a huge favor doing that.
He could be under the water to allow them to get the shots that they need, opposed to being able to hold your breath for 1 minute. You know, like, okay, that's not a lot of stuff that you can do, especially when you're swimming and you're being very active. You know, the more active you are, the more... or the higher your heart rate is, and then the faster you burn through all your oxygen in your body.
That's what Ilsa Faust talks about in the movie, yeah.
Yeah, he was even talking about how afterwards he had to kind of learn how to auto-regulate his breathing back to normal after just being able to like kind of slow his heart rate down.
How amazing does that shot look, by the way, when he jumps into that like black hole of the water turbine? It just jumping into complete blackness and darkness.
Crazy. So...
that shot, by the way, sorry, before you go forward, that shot, if you look at it behind the scenes, it's literally the only thing like real in that underwater pool is like the one handle that he's turning to get into that coded file. Everything else is just like green screen under there.
Yeah, but still really cool that he's in the water.
Yeah, that's what makes it work.
It all looks so real
it really
because
does.
of it. You know, like it's really hard to get CGI hair to look good.
Yeah.
You know, like, and they made it all work. I'm curious, how long can you hold your breath?
I don't know. Do you know off the top of your head?
We're
just going to sit here and hold our breath on camera?
I am piss poor at holding my breath. I'm surprised I can even swim. I'm so bad at holding my breath.
Well, we could swim to the end of the pool and back when we were training for the triathlon, right? Which
I don't think we went there and back. I think we just went there. Because there and back is 50 yards, and I don't think I've done that before.
Maybe we just went there.
I think we just went there. But I'm curious, and maybe our listeners won't like it. But I want to hold our breath and see how long we can go.
Is this the surprise you had for the end of the episode?
How fun. I'm telling you, maybe 20 seconds, 30 seconds for me.
Okay, should I give up when you're done? Or should I go?
No, I want you to go. Ready?
You're starting a timer?
Yeah. 3, 2. Dang it. 50 seconds. You went out at the same time. Did you go out because I let go, or did you go out?
I think I'm gonna crack I think I'm gonna crack at like the actual same time as you, like just quieter, like because I was like I was starting to not make it anymore.
50 seconds.
I'm actively like sweating.
Yeah.
I really was trying my hardest to make it to a minute.
That was my goal too. I was like, because normally when I'm in the water swimming, I got like 30 seconds in me, but just sitting here, I was able to like kind of calm down, but I could just feel everything so tight. Like I tried to relax a few times, but I was just full of air, so I couldn't just fully relax. And
yeah, I was just thinking the whole time about how I couldn't breathe, so yeah, I don't think that was helping.
I literally just burst out at 50 seconds. I was like, I'm going to make it to a minute when it was at like 40, and I did not. So he was 5 minutes and 10 seconds longer.
That's
wild.
Freaking insane.
And he's doing things.
And he's acting and moving. At a desk,
which is wild.
Also, being underwater, there's a lot more of a fear aspect you have to conquer. Because, like, we can just breathe at any moment,
Yeah. Kate Winslet got 7 minutes and 47 seconds.
Yeah, the other Avatar staff cast members did really well also.
Yeah.
Sigourney Weaver had a really long breath hold on the movie.
Would that be a stunt that you're willing to prepare for?
That's honestly a scarier one to me than a lot of other ones, because I feel like drowning is really terrifying.
But like,
I know you probably wouldn't drown. There's rescue teams and everything there. And the water, the surface is probably not far.
Right. And you're not doing it all in one take.
Yeah.
But
yeah, I think underwater scene would be really cool. I think I'd want to try that.
Yeah. I don't know if I can get to 6 minutes though.
Man, we barely even talked about like the halo jump, the motorcycle driving.
Yeah, there's so much stuff that we can talk about.
An under-acknowledged one is that he's actually climbing up that rope on the bottom of the plane in Fallout, and he climbs up that rope as the plane's taking off, and then he's actually piloting the plane at the end of that movie. He's flying the plane, he's operating the cameras because he's the only one in the plane, he's acting, he's like monitoring he's doing so many jobs at once. He's doing sound, audio, and everything in there.
Piloting a plane, I don't know if I'd want to do that as a stunt. Would you?
I feel like that'd be kind of one of the less scary ones if you were trained to do it.
Yeah.
I mean, because I don't think you're going to do anything crazy like in a helicopter,
Yeah. I don't know. I'd consider learning how to do that. But my favorite stunt out of all of the movies, man, the halo jump was really cool. But so was jumping out of the building. I don't really know, man. It's too hard. I think I would have to fall to jumping out of the building and running down the side. Like, that's the one that I would be the most scared of, I think.
Yeah, I think that is also my favorite stunt. And I feel like Rogue Nation ups the ante in storytelling with the Syndicate and Solomon Lane. And I just feel like the story and the villain are the best as it gets in the franchise. But I feel like that what Mission Impossible is known for and that feeling that Mission Impossible generates is at its peak in Ghost Protocol, where, like I said, the scenarios they design, like the one where they're getting the diamonds and the codes and making that swap, that whole sequence, the Kremlin sequence, the outside of the Burj Khalifa. I mean, it's too classic Mission Impossible for me to pass it up as my favorite.
Yeah, I think that one's at the top. I do want to watch Fallout again because I remember, again, really liking that one.
I think you'll really like how cinematic it is with the lighting and the camera works. Like,
yes,
it has this, just in watching it, like the widescreen view and everything that they capture, like it feels very like spy thriller in tone visually.
Yeah, I'm excited for that one to rewatch, but then I'm also very excited for a movie theater experience this week.
I'm so excited for Dead Reckoning.
Let's go. We're going to see it on Wednesday, and then we'll come back here to the studio, record an episode, and get it out on Thursday. So, again, this week is dedicated solely to Mission Impossible, which is well-deserved, and we probably could keep talking if we didn't have to record another episode after this one. So, I'm glad that you kind of rekindled your love for this franchise. I've always loved it. And I'm really excited because this will be my first time seeing it in theaters.
Yeah.
Seeing one of these movies in theaters.
Me too.
Yeah.
So everybody make sure, along with us, you go to see Mission Impossible in theaters, in IMAX if you can. Buy 2, 3 tickets. Dead Reckoning Part 1 is going to be a legendary movie. I think it's going to be a whole lot of fun. I think it's relatively guaranteed good time at the theater. And I am beyond excited to watch it. Make sure you come back and watch our episode that we're going to put out this Thursday reviewing it. Try and see the movie first, but definitely make sure you watch that episode at some point and refer your friends to this video. Tell them if they want that recap, if they want to just reminisce with us and share the love for the series, thinking about our favorite scenes and talking about we got to the nitty gritty of what makes Mission Impossible tick and why it works. So I think that was a lot of fun for us. Hopefully anybody that made it this far enjoyed listening, but definitely tell your friends to check this out so we can all enjoy this franchise together.
Yeah, before we officially close, I'd kick myself if I didn't mention it, but I really love how we had Henry Cavill in a movie that we're talking about, and you have his curly Q haircut from Superman right now. I mean, it's so cute. I love it.
This is actually by accident. I feel like it looks like I sculpted it and hooked it right here. It just fell out of my other hairs.
It's very fitting. It's great. I love it.
Got the glasses and everything.
We post new episodes every Monday and Thursday. We're on YouTube and Spotify, Apple Podcast, everywhere else you get your podcast for those full episodes. And then we're on every social media and we post there daily. We're on Threads now.
Yeah.
You can go check that out. We've been posting a bunch of stuff there. Thanks for listening. Thanks for the support. And that's a wrap.